Institute for Systems Biology, widely known as ISB, is a collaborative and cross-disciplinary nonprofit biomedical research organization based in Seattle's South Lake Union neighborhood. ISB was co-founded 20 years ago by genomics pioneer Dr. Lee Hood. Dr. Hood understood the gap between conventional models for exploring and funding breakthrough science and the real potential of what is possible. In order to bridge that gap, he started the first ever institute dedicated to systems biology. In 2018, renowned chemist and biologist Dr. Jim Heath took over as president of ISB. Under his leadership and ISB's affiliation with Providence, one of the nation's largest not-for-profit healthcare systems, ISB's science is in a unique position to transform health. Our science is translational, and we champion sound scientific research that results in real-world clinical impacts. We focus on some of the most pressing issues in human health, including brain health, cancer, and aging, as well as many infectious diseases, including COVID-19. Today, our one-of-a-kind immune response study is helping the research and medical community better understand COVID-19. And our brain health research is showing promising and actionable results that may very well slow or even stop the progression of Alzheimer's disease. At ISB, grand visions for breakthroughs in human health inspire a collective drive to achieve the seemingly impossible.
Good evening, and welcome to the Institute for Systems Biology's third annual Reimagine event. My name is Renee Duprell, and I'm the Director of Development here at ISB. We're so pleased you could join us tonight. Some of you are longtime supporters of ISB, and for some of you, this is your first introduction to our work. We're thrilled to welcome all of you. I have just a few housekeeping items to get us started. At the bottom of your screen, you have a chat box, and we'll be using that for two things tonight. If you have any technology issues or questions, you can type them into that box and someone will get back to you. And if you are moved to pledge a gift to support our research tonight, you can type it into that chat box and we'll connect with you in the next few days about how to make that gift. The chat box is confidential. I can see it and so can a few of my colleagues. You definitely want to stick with us for the next hour. Just by attending tonight, you've already been entered in 3 giveaways and we'll let you know at the end of the evening who's a winner. We have an autographed copy of the book Live Wired by David Eagleman, a neuroscientist with whom we hosted a very popular Town Hall Seattle event in October. We are giving away a 1-year subscription to Brain HQ, and you'll hear more about that a little bit later in the evening. And our featured speaker, Dr. Mary Kay Ross, has donated a full new patient evaluation, which is a $5,500 value. If you've ever wanted the details about anything and everything that could be affecting your brain function, you will want this gift. You'll want to hear more about how Dr. Ross works with her patients later in the evening. Now, I'd like to kick off tonight's festivities by introducing you to our fabulous Reimagine event chair, Lori Black.
Hello and welcome everyone. We are so happy you can join us tonight for our annual Reimagine event. I am Lori Black, a member of the ISB Foundation Board, and tonight we're excited to tell you about the work of ISB, the Institute for Systems Biology. ISB is a local nonprofit organization in bioscience research, established in Seattle for 20 years. We have a broad range of cutting-edge research projects underway now, including in cancer, COVID-19, and in brain health. We also offer very progressive STEM education programs in schools all across Washington and extending into other areas as well. ISB's work is based on a new innovative model of healthcare called scientific wellness. That model promotes early and personalized intervention based on an in-depth data analysis of genetics and other markers so that we can identify future disease potential and take steps to reduce or prevent that potential from developing. This model differs from the current model, which diagnoses and treats disease at a later stage when it's more advanced. Tonight, our program focuses on ISB's groundbreaking research in brain health and the effects of Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia. ISB is conducting studies in dementia treatment using what is called a multimodal approach. This differs from current treatments, which generally use and treat with one medicine. The multimodal approach incorporates a broad range of interventions, including important lifestyle measures. As we move along tonight, you will meet ISB's founder, Dr. Lee Hood, our president, Dr. Jim Heath, and a leader in the Alzheimer's research, Dr. Nathan Price. You will also hear about the fascinating work of a key research partner here in Seattle, a physician studying and treating dementia patients every day, and who can tell us ways to sustain our good brain health that we can do right now. That's Dr. Mary Kay Ross of the Brain Health Research Institute. Now, I'd like to get us started with the story of another foundation board member who has experienced the big impacts of Alzheimer's in her own family. Please meet and welcome Electa Anderson.
Thanks, Lori. I'm delighted to welcome all of you here tonight. My journey with Alzheimer's disease began nearly 22 years ago when my husband, Norm, a brilliant engineer with a master's degree from the University of Washington, a gentle giant with an amazing sense of humor, and a father and a husband who could have won the Father and Husband Award of the Year any year, was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's when he was 55. The opportunity to serve on the National Alzheimer's Association Board for an 8-year term, and now the ISB Foundation Board, has given me the opportunity to transfer this tragedy into a mission. And that has truly been a gift beyond measure for me. I'm also honored to have this time to help raise awareness about ISB and their peer-reviewed research that is supporting a new health model for brain health. ISB is leading the way right here in Seattle, and I'm so excited so many of you have joined us this evening. I would now like to share a little of my personal journey as we faced the tragic diagnosis of Norm's Alzheimer's disease. I, like many, countless others, was transformed into a caregiver, blindly navigating dementia's unpredictable haze. I know how difficult it is to come to a place of acceptance, but once one can do that, it is empowering over the disease. And this is why I think it's important for us to share our stories. Norm and I grew up in Ballard, and our maternal grandparents were neighbors in Norway who settled in Ballard. We started dating when I was a junior at Ballard High School and Norm was a freshman at the University of Washington. We married in our early 20s and moved to California after Norm finished graduate school. For over 30 years, we lived the good life in California, raising 2 beautiful daughters. Our magical California living came to an end when Norm, at the pinnacle of his career, with a brilliant mind full of laughter and fun, was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's in the late 1990s. My work sustained us financially for over 5 years. During those 5 years, we sold our house in San Clemente and moved to Leisure World in Laguna Niguel. My consulting business was very successful, but also very demanding. When I wasn't working, I was coordinating and scheduling clinical trials for Norm to participate in at both UCLA and the University of California at Irvine. Needless to say, I was exhausted and overwhelmed, but convinced that we would find a cure for Norm's Alzheimer's disease. Norm always had such an insight about what was happening to him, and one day he said to me, "Can you please help me?" And I said, "Of course, what's wrong?" He said, "I'm trapped in my own shirt." He could no longer unbutton his shirt, and I knew from that day forward things would never be the same. In 2004, I decided we needed to make another major change, and we moved back to Seattle, to Ballard, where both Norm's mother and my mother were still living, and we had amazing family support. We moved in with Norm's mother, who was living in the house Norm was born and raised in, and I felt it was a better environment for him to be connected to his childhood memories. He never got confused in his childhood home. This arrangement lasted about 1.5 years when this gentle giant of a man with an incredible intellect and so much fun to be with turned upside down and very violent. He ended up in the geriatric psych center for over 6 weeks, and it was an experience from hell, and one I wasn't quite sure I'd pick myself up from. I was determined that he would not die in the geriatric psych center, and managed to get him home in hospice for 6 hours before his long journey and struggle with Alzheimer's ended, and he passed away in 2006 at the age of 63 and ending our marriage of 41 years. Our daughters, Beth and Corin, were always Norm's priority, and they would spend hours at dinner discussing current day events and philosophy. With all his many professional accomplishments, Norm will always be most remembered for his ability to make others happy when they were around him. I think one of the greatest things I learned as a caregiver is that we all thrive when we feel safe, when we are witnessed, and when we are encouraged. I think this is one of the most important things to remember as a caregiver, for both the caregiver and the one with the disease. Waking up and reminding yourself of this each morning can help guide you through each day. No one should ever feel they are trapped in their own shirt. Therefore, I hope you will join the ISB Foundation Board this evening and empower the outstanding researchers at ISB with a generous donation. It will empower you, our community, and it will raise your serotonin level, which is good for keeping all our brains healthy. Please enjoy the evening, and thank you again for being here with us.
Electa, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. I know this is an issue that hits too close to home for you, as well as for many others here tonight. Now I'd like to introduce Dr. Nathan Price. Nathan is a professor here at the Institute, and he is also an affiliate faculty at the University of Washington in the departments of bioengineering, computer science and engineering, and molecular and cellular biology. Nathan has an extensive list of accolades and achievements, and I'm picking just one to share with you tonight. In 2019, he was selected by the National Academy of Medicine as one of their 10 emerging leaders in health and medicine. Dr. Nathan Price.
So it's a pleasure to be talking to you today about Alzheimer's disease and the efforts that we've been leading at the Institute for Systems Biology, along with our clinical partners at Providence St. Joseph Health and the Brain Health and Research Institute, in what we think is a paradigm shift in the approach to Alzheimer's disease. So to start, I want to just introduce the notion that the typical paradigm of the single drug, single target approach has thus far totally failed in Alzheimer's disease. We're 0 for 400 in clinical trials on drugs trying to make a difference in Alzheimer's disease. And you can imagine the hundreds of billions of dollars that have been spent largely without efficacy. There has been one trial that has made a difference thus far, which is called the FINGER study. And in that trial, it was aimed at early stage Alzheimer's and dementia. And it focused on things like diet and exercise, making measurements out of the blood, and doing some personalized interventions around them. That actually did have a very positive effect on Alzheimer's, into the development into Alzheimer's disease. And it made a big difference in, and it's the only trial that's actually had a big effect. So one of the things that we've been working on at ISB are new paradigms for how we think about moving into a world where we can more effectively deal with chronic diseases like Alzheimer's. And I'll do a little bit of a background on this, but one of the things that has really developed over the course of the 20th century was that when we started the foundations of medicine, and this was really done primarily with a guy named Abraham Flexner, who very famously went through all the medical schools at the time and determined that they were not deeply rooted in science. And he did the big push for the transformation that occurred where we really brought science in to medicine. And it had a huge transformation because if you think about life in the early 20th century, it's more of a statistic, but basically it was a world in which every third coffin was filled with the body of a child who had died from an infectious disease. And that led very naturally to a paradigm of find the pathogen and kill it, this find it and fix it mentality. That coupled with public health measures had a huge effect, and we basically do not die in our country and in many countries around the world of the kinds of diseases that plagued us 100 years ago. If we fast forward though, one of the things that's happened is we've bolted that find it and fix it mentality onto a find the target, drug it approach. And that find the target, drug it has had the effect of, there's been a lot of drugs that have helped people. I don't want to minimize that in any way. But if you look broadly, we have not had anything like the success on chronic disease like Alzheimer's that we have with infectious disease. And we think this necessitates a very different approach based around multimodal therapy. Now, what we've done is with scientific wellness, and some of what we have developed at ISB over the years has been to do these deep data clouds to be able to optimize a person's health and try to avoid the transition states into disease at their earliest inception. And what we're doing now is taking the benefits that have been observed from the finger study, marrying that with this deep data approach in scientific wellness to try to say, can we do something that has a major effect on Alzheimer's disease with a new approach around multimodal therapies that will not be based around a single drug, single target approach, but rather will look at a very personalized, multimodal, complex set of therapeutic interventions that can, we believe, make a difference in chronic disease. And we're testing this now in clinical trials that are ongoing within the Providence St. Joseph Health System, as well as studies that we're doing with Dr. Mary Kay Ross in the Brain Health and Research Institute, to which we're affiliated here in Seattle. These efforts are critically important. We believe that they have the chance to make a real difference in changing the trajectory of Alzheimer's disease. This is an area that we really need philanthropic support because, again, it's jumping into new areas, new approaches where you have to get kind of go out on a limb and push and make a paradigm shift. And so we hope that you will join with us and on an incredible journey that where we believe that this is the beginning of really being able to have a new approach to chronic disease.
Thanks so much, Nathan. And I'm very excited to announce that we have a group of ISB board members and supporters who have contributed to a matching challenge of $20,000. Any gift you make tonight will be matched dollar for dollar up to $20,000. So our scientists like Nathan have big plans for that funding. I know that they know exactly how they want to spend it. So just type the amount you'd like to pledge into that confidential chat box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll connect with you about how to make that gift. On behalf of Nathan and many other researchers here at the Institute, thank you so much for considering this. Now I'd like to introduce Dr. Jim Heath in conversation with Dr. Mary Kay Ross. Audience members, this is a point where you can jump in and start asking questions of Dr. Ross and Dr. Heath, and you're going to use that Q&A box at the bottom of your screen to do that. You're welcome to start doing that at any time. Dr. Heath is the president and professor at ISB here in Seattle. He has directed the National Cancer Institute-funded NSB Cancer Center since 2005, and he was named one of the top 7 innovators in the world by Forbes magazine. Dr. Jim Heath.
Thank you so much, Renee. It's a pleasure to be here, and I want to in particular, thank all the folks who have agreed to join us for the Reimagine event this evening. It's a real pleasure tonight to introduce Mary Kay Ross, and then I think we're going to have a discussion afterwards, and we'll try to answer some questions. So when I came to the ISB, gosh, pandemic time seems to stretch out so long, but I think it's only been a couple of years ago. We were just beginning to get serious about doing brain health studies, and it's a natural for ISB because of the basically systems approach one needs to take to understanding brain health and how to restore brain health when it goes south. And time and again, Mary Kay's name came up as the physician that you wanted to go see if you wanted to explore multimodal therapy. And time again, multimodal therapy came up as the approach that was really the approach of the future. And it was then that we decided that we were going to bank our scientific efforts on trying to understand and quantitate multimodal therapy. And it was and we also reached out to Mary Kay and we asked her if she would like to start a clinic here in Seattle and partner with us. And she did. In fact, she launched the Brain Health Research Institute here just about a year and a half ago or so. Prior to coming into the BHRI and founding it, she was the chief medical officer of MPI Cognition, the firm credited with introducing multimodal Alzheimer's therapies to America. But actually, Mary Kay was initially an emergency room physician. And I think after about a decade of being an emergency room physician, she saw the light. So anyway, it's great. I'm so happy you're here, and I'm glad you have a Christmas sort of theme behind you. I think it can put us all in the mood. So Mary Kay, she's going to talk to us for about 15 minutes, and then we'll have a Q&A.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks for the introduction. And I want to thank everybody at ISB and Providence for having me speak tonight. This is an honor, and certainly it's a huge passion of mine. And I'm going to start out. I know we're supposed to talk about Alzheimer's disease and the relationship of Brain Health and Research Institute with ISB, but I first want to start with talking about the problem, because I think this problem is so incredibly significant. I think that Alzheimer's disease is probably one of the most devastating disease and terrifying to me. And believe me, I see a lot of it. I can't think of anything worse. And I did come from the emergency room. So from a level 1 trauma center background, I've seen a lot of bad stuff. And to me, this is probably the most devastating, because you really are losing your brain function and really the essence of who you are, and your family watches this. So I have to tell you, this has me hook, line, and sinker, just wanting to help people. And so when we talk about over 400 failed drug trials, I want everybody to keep in mind that every drug equates to billions of dollars. And that's not the way it is for cancer research. Cancer drugs are in the millions. So we've spent billions, and think about it, over 400 failed drug trials, and we really have nothing yet to show for it. We don't have anything that has been successful. And so I think that, you know, when you look at statistics, and I know we all know the statistics are staggering, Blue Cross and Blue Shield has a report they do annually. And in their last report on Alzheimer's disease, I thought these numbers were just amazingly terrifying. So the average age from 2013, they looked at all of their insureds from 2013 to 17. And the average age has gone down to 49 years old. Okay, so think about that. The average age of all dementias, this isn't just Alzheimer's, it's all dementias and Alzheimer's. The average age is 49. That's terrifying. And although I almost feel like I dodged a bullet, you know, I wish I were 49. But besides that, when you look at 2013 to 2017, all numbers, all people with that diagnosis have gone up 200%. And when they focus just on 2017, it's 373%. So I would say we have a tsunami coming. It's clear. And I think we not only need to prepare for it, but it's time to ponder this a little bit. And this really is what we do. So you have to think about why. Why are the numbers, the age is going down, the numbers are going up dramatically. You know, if we don't fix this problem by 2050, we're going to spend $1.1 trillion. And that to me, again, is staggering. So we have a problem, clearly. And I, as a physician, you know, I have lots of patients and I hear their stories over and over about what they encounter when they finally muster up the courage to go see a primary care physician or a neurologist. I think that it's amazing. They come away just so discouraged because what they're hearing is, you have a bad disease. This, you know, you need to get your affairs in order. And here, maybe you want to take some Aricept or try a Mediterranean diet. That's what we have to offer people. And I would argue that this isn't enough. And so clearly, this is what pushes me every day to do the multimodal therapy. I have to tell you that monotherapy, so one drug, the single drug, and predominantly the one that everybody's been chasing is after amyloid, a single drug doesn't work because we know that Alzheimer's disease has many different drivers. I would argue that the end result is the same, but the avenue that you get there with is different for different people. And that's related to genetics, environment, and really what their tipping factor was. It's much like if you think about using diabetes as an example. Type 2 diabetes, we have drugs that control it, but I would argue the intention is never really to get people over it. I cure that in my practice every day. And so I think we as doctors have to really put more thought into the lens that we look at this disease with and our approach with our patients. I think primary care physicians need to be, they're the front line. So they really need better training to be able to deliver what these patients need. I think that we cannot have one hypothesis for this disease because I really do believe it has lots of drivers. Dr. Dale Bredesen, whom you know I worked with, actually divided Alzheimer's into 5 different types. And I think this has been really helpful for the understanding of the disease. And type 1 is inflammatory, type 1.5 is glucose. So diabetes, if you're diabetic, you have a much higher risk of Alzheimer's. And if you're a female going through menopause, again, you have a much higher risk. This is often the time that this disease shows up for females. And so I think it's really important to recognize this if you're somebody developing cognitive decline. My goal is to create more of a community and to dispel a lot of the stigma that comes with Alzheimer's. I find that patients are often embarrassed and they feel like they aren't smart anymore. And family members often aren't as patient as they need to be with them. And so at the Brain Health and Research Institute, we're using a multimodal approach, which means that I still act as a doctor. I look at blood and put them on nutraceuticals and programs designed specifically for their needs. But we also approach diet differently, sleep. We also work on brain exercises using Brain HQ to increase neuroplasticity. We work on physical exercise and dual tasking, which we find helps with neuroplasticity as well. I've recently, since COVID, broken my patients down into small groups, and we really have created a sense of community. They seem to respond very well. and find that they have other people that they can relate to. I have a patient that has actually agreed to play a video and put their story out there for everybody to listen to. So I think we're going to play that right now. I'm Dr. Mary Kay Ross, and this is Lucy, my patient. Lucy's been kind enough to offer to share some of her story with us. Lucy's a 79-year-old retired physician and started with me back in 2017. So Lucy, if you want to share just a little bit, this gives people so much hope. What were things like for you in the beginning? How did this all start?
Well, it started because when I was about 54, I started noticing my memory was bad, and then talking to people, and nobody had any good ideas what to do until somebody mentioned Dr. Bredesen's research paper, and I contacted him. And after a while, when he looked at my blood tests, he said, "You really, the best person there possibly could be for you to see is Dr. Mary Kay Ross, because you have type 3 type of Alzheimer's, which is the toxic kind, and that you're a particular specialist in that."
That's right.
So, but then I did chelation with you because I had very high mercury and lead, and the mercury came down from the highest possible to the lowest, not the lowest, but into the normal range, and the lead not quite normal. And we're going to be working on getting it down still further.
Now, Lucy, you've had a repeat MRI a year ago.
Right.
And were the results better?
Yes, they were. There was actually, they went 54 to 50%, and then it was all the way up to 60%. Yeah, that's right.
Fantastic.
It was a 12% increase in the hippocampus. So that was really wonderful news, and it corresponded with how I was feeling. I wanted to tell people too that when I used Brain HQ, I was down around the 20th percentile, 16th% for my age. And because I play it every single day, 7 days a week, I'm now up. Just 2 days ago, I'm in the 89th percent for my age. So those things are important because they show you're getting better on a day-to-day basis. And if you can't do as well, then you can just work a little harder.
Well, you're certainly a success story. You've had a lot of battles, with Dr. Bredesen's protocol in the beginning. You certainly seem to hit every one of the things that can cause this problem, and we've battled right through them, and we still are today working on things.
Well, I'm glad you're reminding me of that. The supplements, getting them right. I think I had 32 abnormal lab tests in the beginning, with every hormone, every vitamin, and some really weird values. And that has taken quite a while, and you're helping me getting them right has, I know, helped.
Well, thank you, Lucy, for sharing this. This has been really helpful, and I think that this will give a lot of hope to other people that are listening. Thank you very much.
I hope so.
Wow. That was really cool. So, Mary Kay, we're going to have a bit of a discussion now. I think you probably have inspired people to think deeply about brain health in general. And I think one thing that people have been concerned with, especially with this pandemic, is that people have been in a routine for now, 9 months? And I think of it as, the more you get into this routine, the lower and lower your energy state is, because you don't have to think about all the different things that you need to do through the day, because it's almost becomes a motor function. And so with that observation in mind, what do you tell your patients, or what do you tell people that are curious about how to best deal with this pandemic and take care of their brain health?
I think that's a great question, and it's certainly a big problem. You know, when you review the literature on isolation, social isolation, people do poorly. It increases all chronic diseases across the board, and not to mention mental health. So I think, we have to persevere. I'm a big believer that perception is reality. And therefore, I think we have to be positive about this and look for things that you used to love to do and start them again. If you're a traveler, you can make a memory board and put on pictures of places that you've been and places that you want to go when COVID is over. Take up crafts, learn a language, start meditating, start exercising. And I think also, Jim, it's really important to focus on the pillars of our program. Those are pillars really for lifestyle and healthy aging. It's something that everybody will benefit from if you think a little more about yourself. Think about how you're sleeping, how you're eating, work on your diet, but then take up new activities. Learn a language, start dancing, get a puppy, go out and start gardening, farming, do something different, because staying the same and being very mundane is not good for your brain or any part of your health.
So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, I think very clearly from the video we just saw that there are a lot of epigenetic factors involved in Alzheimer's. The lead levels and mercury levels were off, and they could be, I assume, corrected through diet. But there's also genetic factors. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that and how you might suggest people that are at high genetic risk, are there things they should be thinking about? There's the ApoE gene and et cetera.
Absolutely. And so I'm a firm believer that your genes don't have to be your destiny. Of course, I say that in a group of people here with some major geneticists. So, but I think that you should know your ApoE status, especially if you have family history of Alzheimer's or dementia. I think knowledge is so important. And for my patients that have the ApoE4 genotype, which increases your risk for Alzheimer's, we do push a little harder. We push a little harder with their diet. We push with fasting. We believe that intermittent fasting plays a big part and helps dramatically. So if you're at home and you're trying to figure out how you can sort of parse out a better lifestyle plan for yourself, you need to think about diet. Diet is a big driver. I think you need to avoid any processed food, limit simple sugars, eat more plant-based, decrease red meat, avoid alcohol. All of these things will help with cognitive function and overall health. And, the reality is you can't have a healthy brain without a healthy heart, vascular system. Your gastrointestinal tract needs to be adequate. You don't want to have leaky gut. And so all of these things are really important.
Well, another. Oh, sorry.
No. Go right ahead.
Well, another factor that I think is critical, and we've talked about this a lot, and our colleague that we've worked with from UCSF, Mike Merzenich, has been pushing this. Even your patient referred to this. Basically, is exercise in your brain, and maybe you could talk to us a little bit about what you know about that, what you think the benefits are, and are there even quantitative ways to, what do you see in your patients' labs, for example, when they exercise their brain?
Well, when they exercise their brain, first of all, there's good exercises, and then there's some exercises that are really brain leisure activity. And actually, Mike Merzenich was the one that really explained this well to me. So we use Brain HQ exclusively, and we know that it exercises different parts of the brain. And so our patients sometimes will have more difficulty in an area perhaps that is affected in their brain. And so we'll look at we use volumetric MRI, and we literally look at the pattern of atrophy or damage. And we also use our neuropsychological testing to look at the domains that people may be having problems with. And we will then prepare their brain HQ according to that. And we actually have coaches that have learned how to get into their portal and set it up so that they get the optimal results. We also use brain exercises with our physical exercise. So we do dual tasking. And the importance is it creates neuroplasticity. It increases brain-derived neurotrophic factor, the growth hormone for your brain. And honestly, I'm seeing time and time again now MRIs that are coming back with increased volume.
Wow. Something, you know, for those of you out there, the folks who don't know, so Brain HQ, and I'm not going to, I think it's the evidence that it has high value is pretty clear. It's just a simple set of games you play on a computer. They're sort of reaction games or awareness games. One of them, all these birds fly on your screen, and there maybe 20 of them are blue and 2 of them are gray. And then you get a quick glimpse at them, and then you pop out the gray ones. And I talked to Mike Merzenich, who, he founded this, and I told him I could do that like every time perfectly. And Mike said, well, you should have been a bird watcher. So I guess I missed my calling in life. Anyway, they're kind of fun games, but I think they have actual real concrete value. And I think for exercising your brain, especially during these times like now where perhaps the stimulus is not as it would be out of the pandemic is really critical. I wonder if you could say a little bit about diet. So one of the audience members asked if you recommend restricted eating hours each day. Do you think you should fast for 8 to 10 hours and 24, or should you do it for what do you suggest for restricted eating?
So what I suggest, and what we do in our small groups, honestly, is we encourage our patients to, first of all, have their last meal in the evening by 7. So end by 7, not start at 7, but end by 7. We like to see them get in bed by 10 and have 3 hours of nothing after they eat, other than water. And then that begins their fast. And when they get up in the morning and break their fast, we really look at their ApoE4 status. We also look at how severely impacted they are. So we like to think that if you're at 3-3, which is the normal ApoE genotype, or the most common, the most prevalent, we recommend 12 hours. And then if you have a copy of the ApoE4, 1 or 2, we increase your fasting. And we find that those people seem to fast easier. It doesn't seem to bother them as much. And I go all the way up to 16 or 18 hours of fasting, depending on the patient. We also, with the diet, we want to encourage more plant-based. We use meat as a condiment, and we use healthy fats. We really have tried to reduce all processed foods. My patients actually don't eat grains, and then we reintroduce them later, but we want to initially develop, we call it metabolic fitness. We want them to be able to get into ketosis easily. We know that ketones are an energy form for cells, and particularly for mitochondria and the brain. The ketones work very well as an energy source. Babies, when they're nursing, are in ketosis, and think about their brains are developing and growing. It's just a very good energy source for the brain. We also want to watch their blood sugar and make sure that they're not, having any glycotoxicity or elevated blood sugars with the diet as well.
So amazingly enough, I have a question for me. And so someone asked about how we are taking advantage of our unique partnership with the Providence St. Joe's healthcare system. So before we partnered with Mary Kay to open up the Brain Health Research Institute, we did launch 2 trials in Southern California through the Providence system, one in Orange County at the Hogue, and one at St. John's, and that's ongoing in Santa Monica. But there's been several other things that we've happened to develop over the past really 8 months during the COVID pandemic, which I think are really opening up our ability to do novel trials. So during COVID, patients didn't want to go into hospitals. And in fact, you didn't necessarily want them to go into hospitals if they could avoid it. And so we developed abilities to enroll patients into trials where the patient never ever had to see a physician. It was all done by a telemedicine or by iPhone. We developed mobile phlebotomy that allowed us to go and collect blood for either normal labs that the physician might order or for scientific testing at the patient's home or at some location of the patient's choosing. And now we're beginning to push those types of technologies into all of our studies. And it opens up patient demographics that people that have ambulatory handicaps where they can't get around easily, they can't drive, maybe they're economically disadvantaged, what have you. And so the partnership with Providence, and I think some of the clever things we've been doing at ISB have really, really opened up our ability to do science in novel ways. So it's been a potent partnership. And I'm guessing, Mary Kay, that we are near the end of our discussion. Do you have any last words you want to tell the folks online?
I guess really I'm a big believer in the pillars of the program that we're using, and I think they're good for everyone. So I actually have made a handout that will be emailed to people in follow-up that will give you tips and suggestions for not only keeping a healthy brain, but how you can stay healthy during COVID as well.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to pass it back to Renee now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim and Mary Kay, and Lucy too. Thank you, Lucy, for sharing your work and your experiences with us tonight. I do have some breaking news on our $20,000 matching challenge. We're over halfway there. We've had a number of pledges come in through our chat box, and a very special pledge, Mr. Kevin Wold, has pledged $10,000. So we are well over halfway there. Thank you so much, everyone. You heard a little bit about our clinical trials tonight and the studies in Alzheimer's, and we will be back in 2021 to give you an update. Some of those studies are just wrapping up and we're analyzing the data. Some are still in progress, and we'll have much more news to share with you in the next 6 to 18 months. So we'll keep you updated on that. I now have the honor of introducing Dr. Leroy Hood. Lee is the Senior Vice President and Chief Science Officer of Providence St. Joseph Health. He is the Chief Strategy Officer, Co-founder, and Professor at ISB. He is the recipient of the 2012 National Medal of Science, the highest honor a U.S. president can bestow upon scientists. And he is one of only a handful of individuals elected to the National Academy of Sciences and the National Academy of Engineering and the National Academy of Medicine. Usually when we ask Lee to make remarks, he speaks about science. But tonight, we've asked him to share his family's story with Alzheimer's. Lee, welcome, and thank you for joining us tonight.
So Valerie, my wife, and I were partners for a wonderful marriage that lasted for 42 years when in 2005, she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. At that time, and in fact today, as you've heard, there is no single drug that worked, and more than 400 have failed clinically over the last 12 years. Valerie, shortly before her diagnosis, had actually told me she wanted to move from our beautiful house on Lake Washington to a downtown condo, which at the time I found incredibly surprising because she complained that she found the large house we had and the yard we had was difficult for her to take care of. And this was surprising because she was infinitely energetic and active and passionate about many things. She had a full-time career in education at the Institute of Systems Biology, and she was passionate in her love of the outdoors and many other things. So she handled all her duties flawlessly and seemingly without effort. And after we did move to Belltown in a condo, I realized how much Valerie had lost because she was totally incapable of dealing with any of the complications that a move entailed, whereas she'd done that flawlessly in our earlier moves and so forth. So I became a caregiver. I managed the household. I even learned for the first time to cook and so forth. And it was absolutely horrifying to deal with Valerie's gradual loss of memory and of cognition. I remember, for example, the trauma when I had to take away her car keys because she'd had a series of minor accidents that were herself. And this has to do with the loss of reflexes that occurs in Alzheimer's and so forth. And of course, this to Valerie was an enormous loss of independence. And it really meant the end of her life in many ways. It was a month before she would really talk to me again. There came a time when finally I hired a wonderful individual, Joe Fiorito, to become her companion and to do many things with her, to take her on walks, to go hiking with her, to take her to movies, to do a whole variety of things. And Joe became, in many ways, her sister and a beloved member of the family. Valerie did, however, continue to lose gradually more and more memory, and for a period of time to become very obstreperous, wanting to run away and do things like this. And she came to require more and more care for toiletry and her personal needs. And in this regard, in 2016, we decided we had to move her into a family care home, Aegis on Madison, which was wonderful. They had a whole memory unit floor with incredibly different activities, music, singing, dancing, walks, movies, TV, and much more. And in the beginning, Valerie really appreciated all of these. I do remember a time about that period when I met with 11 other caregivers to have a session about what it was like, and was horrified to hear that 8 out of the 11 just said, I want it to be over. My life has ended. I can't do anything. I'm getting so depressed. And that's the life of many caregivers, particularly those that don't have resources to bring in some help and so forth. The loss on the caretakers, and I really want to emphasize this, in many cases, is almost as great as the loss on the people, the individuals that are being cared for. But even with the activity in the home over time, excuse me, Valerie became increasingly silenced and less responsive. And in 2019, she had a fall when she was at the bathroom that broke a lumbar vertebrae, and she essentially never was able to walk again normally. It was in many ways the beginning of the end, and she declined in many ways to the point where we realized we had to transfer to a small home that had a much greater ratio of caretakers to patients and so forth. We did this, and it was a wonderful home. They took incredible care of her, and but she still continued to be less and less responsive. And this is where something really interesting happened. I had argued about 6 or 7 years earlier with Valerie's internist that we should get rid of all these Alzheimer's drugs that were useless. And this individual insisted on keeping them. At the time she started to become less responsive, I insisted we take them off all the drugs. And that changed her whole personality with regard to responsiveness, although she still was really not communicative. Valerie, in fact, had really become silent Alice. And in fact, for a time before we took her away from the drug, she was in hospice care for about 4 months. I think the multimodal therapies that you've heard about from Mary Kay are going to absolutely transform this for the Valeries of the world. But it unfortunately is too late for Valerie, as she has lost really significant fraction of her functioning brain cells already. The point I really want to emphasize is this event can have a profound impact on improving the health of the whole family. For example, my daughter had seen her grandmother and her mother with Alzheimer's and was depressed for about 3 or 4 years, increasingly so, because she felt that was her fate. And as you heard from Mary Kay, there is a really dominant Alzheimer's gene, ApoE4, that one can test. And we had our entire family tested for this gene. So Valerie and I each had one bad copy. And I will say, for reasons we don't understand at all, women are more greatly affected than men in this particular regard. Marquis had no bad genes, and this transformed her life. She said, it absolutely changed my attitude toward everything. Now, she's careful about diet and exercise and things, many of the things Mary Kay emphasized, so I think she'll be fine. In contrast, my son had both bad copies of the gene. And to give you some statistics, if you have one bad copy of this gene, at 65, you have a 9% chance of getting Alzheimer's. If you have 2 bad copies, you have a 65% chance of getting it. So what we had Aaron do is go and visit Mary Kay. He's an enormous athlete. He's an ultra marathoner. He runs incredible distances every day. He's very slim, trim. He's incredibly careful about his diet now. And we have every expectation that he is not going to be one of the 65% when he gets to be 65. But the point that I really want to emphasize is there's something you can do about it today. Mary Kay has talked about some of the things, and you have a duty to your family to help them to understand where they may have to take precautions themselves. I did succeed as chief scientist in getting $8 million from Providence to run the clinical trials in the Providence system that you've heard about. And I think these trials have some preliminary results that look very, very promising. And I hope in time this will bring relief, future relief to the Valeries of the world. But what I'd really like to be able to do, and with Mike Merzenik, we're getting set to do a long-term clinical trial on people in their 40s, late 40s, 50s, and 60s that are at high risk for Alzheimer's, to be able to look for biomarkers in the blood that signal the earliest stage of transition to this disease. And we know from other studies that this is 4 to 10 years before a clinical diagnosis ever happens. So suppose we find those markers we can have a simple blood test to ask everyone whether or not they've made that transition. And if they have, they can go get the multimodal therapy, which Mary Kay emphasized. The earlier you start it, the more likely it is to have success in reversing it. So my dream is within 10 years, we'll be able to reverse 80% of early Alzheimer's and bring people back to normal if they're willing to change their lifestyle. So I really urge you to give support for something that could transform for the US and the entire world the way we look at Alzheimer's and how we deal with it. Thank you very much.
Lee, thank you so much for sharing your story with us and for giving us some hope that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. That was a great story. So we're at the end of our evening, and this is your last reminder that the best way to contribute to our $20,000 matching challenge, and we're so close, we're closing in on it. Just hit that chat box at the bottom of your screen. Now it's time to give away some good prizes. I have some holiday elves in the other room who have randomly chosen the winners of all three of our prizes, and the winner of the autographed David Eagleman book is Debbie McDonald. Congratulations, Debbie. We will find you and get you the book. The winner of our one-year subscription to Brain HQ is Dee Dickinson. She's a good friend to ISB. I promise this was random. Congratulations, Dee. And the winner of our grand prize, the new patient evaluation with Dr. Mary Kay Ross, is Joanne Chrisman. So congratulations to all of our winners, and a special thanks to Dr. Ross and the Brain Health and Research Institute for providing that very special grand prize gift. I'd also like to thank tonight's sponsors, BN Builders, Brain Injury Law of Seattle, Thompson Wellness Wealth Management. Thank you so much for making tonight possible. And as Mary Kay said, you will be getting a follow-up email from us with links to a lot of the information and resources that you heard about tonight. So stay tuned for that. Thank you for attending. Thank you for giving. Please have a lovely holiday season, and we'll see you in 2021.